Hey everybody, welcome back to What Self-Care Looks Like. This is Brittany. I am a self-care and mom life management coach. I help working moms create simple, sustainable self-care routines that enrich their lives and impact their overall wellness. And today we are back into the Mother's Day series, and we have another tremendous mom and woman here to share her story. So today we have Dominique Taylor. She's a brand strategist and website designer. As a lifelong creative, she received a Bachelor of Science degree in fashion design from the Art Institute of Pittsburgh in 2014. In 2019, she founded the Rebrand Lab to help fulfill the overwhelming need that many service based businesses have for outside of the box marketing, messaging, and design. In the past 5 years, she's had the privilege of helping over 30 business owners with their brands, spanning industries including beauty, coaching, wellness, and more. She's especially passionate about working with female led businesses. On a personal level, Dominique is married to her best friend Ronald. Together, they run Blackberg Love, a community that celebrates positive Black relationships in the city of Pittsburgh. They have two sons, ages 10 and 8 months. Welcome to the show, Dominique.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to have you here, and I love to give listeners a little bit of backstory about my guest. So I think it was probably at this point 7 or 8 years ago that you and I worked together, and I feel like I knew then that you were going to be a big deal. So I'm so excited to have you on and to hear about your story. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey into motherhood?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that. And I'm glad that we were able to stay in touch over the years. My journey to motherhood started actually in college. My senior year of my college degree seeking being in college, I got pregnant. And that wasn't planned, of course. But it it was necessary, I feel like, because it evolved me into the person that I am today. I couldn't imagine my life without my son, and yeah, I needed it. I needed to grow up, and I grew up fast.
I feel like sometimes our circumstances put us put us in places and slow us down. When you were going through your pregnancy at the time, or even when you entered motherhood, um, what kind of challenges did you have to overcome, especially with it being unplanned, you finishing up college and then having, I'm sure, other plans for your life? Like, how'd you adjust?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in school for fashion design, and I had plans to go off to New York and like really dive into fashion there. There's not much fashion happening in Pittsburgh, unfortunately. So I knew that going into my degree that I was going to move once I was done. And obviously, whenever I had my son, those plans kind of shifted because I needed that support system. My family, I don't have family in New York. They're all here in Pittsburgh. So I kind of had to reroute basically what I thought I was going to do.
Yeah, and then how are things different with your second son? Because what, they're ten years apart or maybe a little
Mhm.
less. So how was that experience?
Yeah. Well, we got pregnant after I got married. So we were trying, and I was just in a different stage of life. 10 years later, I'm a completely different person. I'm a completely different mother. So I feel like, in a sense, they, my sons got two different versions of me. And I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other. But yeah, I'm a completely different person than I was 10 years ago.
Can you speak a little bit more to that, having like the two different versions? Because I hear a lot of women who they have their kids very like far apart,
Yeah.
and they're like, I'm not anywhere near where I was then now. Or even there's women who are thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't have another kid because I don't know if my older kid will feel like, well, why do they get this version of you and I got that? So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about like living in the balance of there are different versions of you as you evolve?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just how I view life in general. We are constantly evolving, or we should be at least constantly evolving. So, the person that I was when I was in college, obviously, I had never experienced being responsible for a human being like that. So, there was a lot of firsts that we had together, me and my son, where I'm just figuring things out as I go. And I would say that the second time around, obviously, I have that knowledge to pull from, but at the same time, like, children are different. So I can't even say that, like, oh, I had a child, so now I've like mastered this thing called motherhood. No, I'm still completely like relearning in a sense. I just have those experiences to draw from, obviously, which makes it a little bit easier, I would say, the second time around. But you know, the way that I approach parenting, I was a lot more anxious the first time around. Like, you just, that's your baby and you feel like they're so fragile and you just want to protect them from everything. And I feel like the second time around, I'm like, oh, he'll be all right. Like, you just have that, like, um the outlook on how, I would say, resilient children are. Is different, and I know that I don't have to do as much coddling and protecting um, with the second baby, because I just know that, like, he's going to be fine. He has great parents, he has a great support system. He doesn't need a bubble to live in, and he'll be okay.
Yeah, that is good. Because me just having one, I always say, I tell my husband all the time, I really don't think that I could do it. Like, I feel like I would just not be able to bring myself back from that. And I say that with the full understanding that if we were to have another child, I would be completely fine. So part of it is just me being dramatic, but also knowing, like, it was tough, especially those first 2 years.
Yeah.
And so just hearing you, like, I've gone through it, I know what I'm capable of. It just is very empowering, and I'm sure for my listeners too. Do you feel that, like, the first time, like with your first son, and it was a surprise and you got pregnant, whereas this time around you had been trying, was there anything, like, were there different challenges from just the way your life was set up in each circumstance that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I would say, getting pregnant in college obviously wasn't like my plan. So more so like worrying about, are my parents going to feel like I let them down? It was a really big deal for me to go to college, like financially and stuff like that. And um, worrying about, like, what are family members going to think? I'm 21 years old. Um, this time around, I mean, I'm married, I'm established. I had a job in college, but it was you know what I mean? It wasn't like a career, I should say. I'm a lot more financially settled. I have a husband who also has a career. So I would say that that's kind of the difference. But I would also say that even at 21, like, the core people in my life, my parents, my siblings, like, once I told them and like they were, excited for me, then I was like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. Like, like, you just got to get out of your own head. And at the end of the day, you got to live your life for yourself. And I think that I'm a lot more secure in myself, obviously, this time around in my 30s than I was in my 20s.
That's great. And the growth too. It's that theme of just, you're growing and you're learning, and as long as you have a support system there with you, it's people that you can lean on, it will always help you. So I would challenge our listeners too to, like, find those people, find your support system. And sometimes it's not your family, like sometimes it's not your parents, but there's always someone that you can find that will be in your corner and support you. So when now you're, like, in that toughest time of new motherhood, like the 0 to 2 years time, what challenges have you had so far along the way, or what challenges are you working to overcome?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges this time around. I would say one of the biggest things is just navigating having two children and having to split your attention two different ways. They both need me, but in such different capacities. So I think it's just learning how to juggle that or balance that, if you will. And then I would also say the fact that I, work for myself and I work from home. So, and my baby is at home, he's not in daycare. So, it's also figuring out how to now divide my time because before he was born, my oldest son, he's in school, which meant that my day was all mine. And now my day is mine in little chunks and it belongs to him. I just figure out where I can, insert different opportunities throughout the day to work and to do whatever else I need to do, pour back into myself.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about how being a mother has pushed you to accomplish your goals, how it's changed your goals personally and professionally? Because you did talk about how when you were in college and you studied fashion design, I studied fashion merchandising. So I definitely was like, not going to stay here, right? We got to go. We got to go. And that completely changed. And now you're an entrepreneur. So how has motherhood kind of shaped that?
Yeah. So I would say that the theme throughout my life, and I know you mentioned it in my bio as well, is that I'm a creative at heart. And I think that when you're a creative, a lot of times it lends to a lot of different things, which is great. I obviously went to school for fashion, so I can make clothes. I would say, though, while I was in school, I realized that I didn't want to be behind a sewing machine my entire life. I knew that. But like I said, financially, it was just a big deal for me to even be in college. So I'm like, I'm not dropping out. I'm not switching majors. Like, I'm just going to stick it out. But I knew that while I was in college, I probably wanted to be more on like the business side of fashion. I knew that back then. So I've had several businesses that I've started even right out of college. So I feel like it's just been an evolution and I've kind of landed on like the thing that feels the best for me. But I would say that when I got pregnant in college, it was just a pivot. I was still doing something that I was passionate about. It just took me a little while to land on web design, but it's always been something in the creative field. So it wasn't a derail by any means. It was just okay. How can we do what we're passionate about and still, be present for my family?
And you seem so sure, which is such a breath of fresh air for you to just still be true to that and realize like I'm a creative and understanding what that means.
Yeah.
Because it's very broad in what you can do when you are a creative, and it really opens yourself up to a lot of opportunities, whereas other career paths, they don't put you in a box, but you feel like you're in a box and you have to do a little bit more jigsaw puzzling to work through that. So for mothers who are kind of struggling with really getting to the core of who they are, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I would say to reflect on the things that you do that light you up the most, the things that you do that you lose track of time and you're like, how has 3 hours passed? The things that maybe you don't have as much time to do right now because you're a mom, but when you did have the free time, you would default to doing because that is usually a sign that like that's something that you're passionate about. And at the end of the day, like I love what I do so much. Obviously, I need to get paid, but I would do it even if I didn't get paid because I love it that much. And I think that that's important because that way I can build my career around something that I love and feel, just empowered. I never want to work to live, or I should say, like, I don't want to feel like I'm getting up every day and my sole purpose is to go to work. Like, I work so that I have the money to be able to do the things that I want with the people that I want and not the other way around. I don't build my life around work.
That's great. And it's me just thinking that made me pause because so much of my life was that. And it was so built around career
Mhm.
and how am I going to make this career work and how am I going to reach all the career goals. And then that shifted like several years ago, probably inconsistent with pregnancy and having a child, but really me thinking like, what do I want to do? Like, where do I want to put my effort? And to your point, what energizes me?
Yeah.
What can I pour myself into? And I have to be like, oh man, you probably should stop and eat something because it's
Mhm.
been so long. And we all can get to that point if we're willing to put in the work. And I want to know a little bit about what is it like to work and be building a business with your husband, because some people kind of shy away from that. So how is that? How's that working out?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I would say that it hasn't always been this way. So when we first met, we were actually both working for a college, and we were both in the office. The pandemic kind of brought us back home, so we were working from home. At that time, I had left, or actually technically they let everybody go in the building that I was in. He was still employed. So then I went to go work at a bank and they sent us home during the pandemic. So I was working at a bank. He was still working in education. He had a little bit more flexibility with like his schedule, but when I was working at the bank, even when I was working at home, I was tied to my computer in a very strict schedule. So even though we were working at home together, we didn't see each other like until the end of the day, pretty much how it would be like if we were in the office. Once I was able to go into full time entrepreneurship, I obviously have a lot more freedom. So we eat lunch together. I mean, we do pretty much everything together, which I know could seem a bit cringy to people that don't necessarily care for their spouse, but I happen to really love who I'm married to, and he's my best friend, and it's great. But we spend a lot of time together because we're both working from home, and we also throughout the day have to collaborate because like I said, I have my son, so if I have a meeting I need to be talking with him. What time can we schedule my meeting so that you can come up and grab him from me, so that so there's a lot of back and forth that we do. But I think communication is the biggest thing that kind of keeps us together, and the fact that we just really like each other.
Yeah, that I get asked that a lot about, how do we figure this out like within our relationship? And I even saw a question pop up in a Facebook group just this week that's like, how do you work with your spouse so that y'all don't get burnt out in parenting? And I'm just like, well, I mean, it is work, but I come to my husband as a human, like as my best friend first. Like I'm not like, how are you feeling today as a father? I'm just like, how do you feel today as a person? What's your day look like? What's your load? And that's how he comes to me. And I'm similar to you. Like I love my husband so much. I would spend every moment of my day with him and not have a problem. Like the pandemic for us wasn't bad to just be up under each other. It was like we were excited, like, yay, we don't have to go anywhere. But some people are struggling
Yeah.
with that even now. And so, what would you say to like as far give us a little relationship advice? What would you say to women who feel like they are in a struggle with finding the balance between being a mother, being a wife, and being themselves?
Yeah. I would say that even though we spend a lot of time together, we both work from home, we run a business together, we're parenting together, it is still important to have like your time apart, your own separate hobbies is super important. Like we are a unit, but we are two individual people, you know? So he has his friends, I have my friends, and I feel like that's important to be able to say, like, hey, it's the weekend, I'm gonna go, grab brunch with my friends, or hey, I had a long day at work. I want to go grab a drink with the guys. Like, I think that that's important because it is a real thing. Like, you don't want to feel smothered in your relationship. So you do have to kind of step back sometimes and just see other faces. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. I know my husband, maybe like a year ago, he was like, "Do I put too much on you because I don't have a lot of friends?" And I'm like, "No, you don't. Because when I need when I need a break, I take my break, and
Yeah.
and he knows me well enough to know, like, don't say something that you want me to try to jump in and try to fix it, because I'm gonna
Yeah.
put on my fix it hat." And so even with that, I think in business, like when you're so used to running a business and making decisions in business, sometimes I know for me, It's like when we're talking, I have to take off my business hat and
Mhm.
just, be like, "Hey,
Yeah.
husband, let's just talk." But and maybe you have felt this too, like as you get have gotten older and have really been in business, you feel like your conversations that you have, even with other people and the friendships that you make, are just at kind of a different level with your conversation. I feel like our small talk is even different. Does that happen with you as well?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's hard for me to turn off like the business stuff. Like even whenever I'm talking to someone and they're just like, telling me about their day or whatever, I'm like, "Oh, that's a business idea. That's a, like a whole like I can turn it off, but I have to be conscious about turning it off just because it's just my world, it's I'm so heavily in it. But I would say that yeah, my conversations have definitely evolved. And I think for the better, though. I feel like it's kind of given me a maturity and an independence, and being a business owner, a free, to be able to be a little bit more of a free thinker because I do a lot of thinking. I can't rely on somebody else to make decisions for me. And I have to speak up for myself. And that's not something that has always been like the most natural thing for me to do. So I think that those skill sets have carried out into like my other relationships as well. Obviously, my romantic relationship, but I think even just relationships with friends and family and stuff like that.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that because it does take effort, like knowing yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what makes you tick, knowing what makes you so creative and so good at the work that you do does involve probably your brain always being on. And
Mhm.
so it's nice for you to be able to say, okay, that's an idea, but maybe I won't bring that up right now.
Yeah,
Um, when it comes to the rebrand lab, and this isn't like, for my listeners, it's not just me just blindly plugging the rebrand lab, but I feel like what you do is just so different from the marketing and strategy support that you see, especially for someone who just scrolls through social media and you're getting a lot of ads on different things. I really feel like you take the time to get to know your client, to really understand what they need and make it feel like them. Like anytime I go to a website that you've just rebranded, it feels like that person, not just like you did it and then you added a little bit of them, but the opposite. So, what is your approach when you work with businesses, and why do you deal with female led businesses?
yeah. I would say that by default, I think that women in business are just attracted to what I do. I think I'm very detail oriented, and I think that it just attracts a certain type of person who is also like a I want everything to feel in line and in check type of person, and it's usually a woman. So there's that, and then I also think that we're able to relate like on a outside of work level, on a heart level, on a things in common. So that is usually why women choose to work with me as well. But I would say that my approach to my work, I've been using this tagline, which is just personality infused brands. I really, so that's like a huge compliment, what you said. First of all, thank you. I really want people to feel that though, because at the end of the day, like I have a a way that I brand myself and my business and my aesthetic. But I want people to have that for themselves because at the end of the day, when our project is over, it's their business. They have to live in it. They have to, so it shouldn't feel like they have on my clothes. It should feel like they have on their own. And I also do that because I'm really big on working with best fit or like ideal clients. And the only way that we're going to get best fit clients, ones that light us up, that we're excited to work with, ones that value what we do, is to attract them from the gate. And that means we have to put our personalities out there because there's 1,000 people that do what we do. But the reason why someone chooses to work with us, especially small business owners, is because they connect with us, like I said in the beginning, on a heart level. So that's why, while I am a brand and web designer, I also talk about being a mom. I also talk about, because I want to attract people that value that understand it, and I think that it works.
Yeah, it definitely does. And for our listeners that are business owners, entrepreneurs, and the like, I just want you to sit with what Dominique said and just understanding like there are a bunch of other businesses that do what she does, and there may be a lot of other businesses that do what you do. And so it's not helpful at all to try to be like anybody else. You know, do what's true to you and you will attract the right clients for you. Because if you start just working with anybody and taking any business, it's going to come back and bite you at the end if you cannot live authentically through your business, unless that's your goal. And if that's your goal, you're not going to be in business for very long, so I don't recommend it. Final question before I let you go. I've loved talking to you, and I just love your clarity. It's like that's what it is. You're just so clear. You're just unwavered. You know who you are. You stand in it, 10 toes down, and I love that. What does self-care look like for you?
Yeah. I think going back to like we're constantly evolving, self care for me like evolves. I would say that in this season, self care for me looks like asking for help. It looks like leaning on my community. I would say maybe like 2 years ago, that wouldn't be the case. I would say self care for me looks like getting out of the house for the day, and you know what I mean? But right now, self care looks like asking my mother-in-law to watch my baby for 2 hours so I can take a nap or take a shower, or do what, run to the grocery store without having to lug out the car seat and the stroller, or ask my sister, hey, I have a consultation call with a client, can we come over your house, I'll use your office to do the consultation call and you can spend some time with your nephew. Right now, that's what self-care looks like for me, is just like leaning on my community and asking for help and not trying to be superwoman and make it all happen, and realizing that there are people in my life that are more than willing to help. They actually want to help. So taking them up on that.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. And can you let our listeners know where they can find you?
Yeah. So everything is at the Rebrand Lab. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. My website is therebrandlab.com. All the things is the Rebrand Lab.
Perfect. Make sure y'all check her out. Dominique, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and share your story with our listeners. And to our listeners, I'll talk to you all very soon.
Thank you for having me.